Hey guys, what's happening? So I just want to talk about this Superbowl Endgame teaser real quick that starts off with just little quick snippets of everybody who died just flashing before our eyes in seconds. And of course with like the exception of like Rocket and a few others, but the first few snippets is definitely focused on dead people. But in this short little clip that's a little under a minute, like 40 something seconds, but in this short amount of time, it's the first time we're really seeing a lot of these effects on Earth on a much larger scale, like all these boats that have been deserted, to which a lot of them are most likely just washed up on shore over an amount of time, with a number of the people on them just disappearing, much like at the end of Avengers Infinity War, which is a lot like what we see in the overview of the Met City field, with grass growing through the dirt and a number of deserted vehicles right outside in the parking lot, just parked any kind of way, which clearly haven't been touched since the snap. But when we get over to Steve Rogers and we see this sign that says, "Where do we go now that they're gone?" and presumably what seems to be like a counseling session, and it seems like something that's put in place just to help the people left behind for not going out of their minds. But when I see this, it reminds me a lot of what we saw in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, where the meetings that were being held were led by Sam Wilson, where he led counseling for veterans dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. And it seems a lot like at this point, Steve Rogers is following in his footsteps and doing much of the same. And so I'm just giving my thoughts and first impressions, so nothing's really 100% confirmed at this point. So we don't know if Steve Rogers is attending or leading these sessions, but just from the look on his face while he's sitting there, he's just listening like, okay man, like I hear what y'all saying, but at this point, I literally have nothing to lose, which is why I truly believe like when it comes to the point that he hears the whole idea as far as using the quantum realm or whatever plan that they're going to do specifically, because he cannot live with himself if there's one chance out of 14,605,000, like he is desperate to take it. And of course at this point he doesn't know it yet, but building up to that revelation, we see the frustration of this guy who's over 100 years old and keeps surviving and losing everybody he cares about, which is pretty crazy when you start to think about it. But moving forward, as we step into the next scene, they start to go by real quick. But when we switch over to Tony and Nebula, who seem to be working on some sort of solution in order to get them back to Earth, well, Tony back to Earth at least, my initial thought was like, okay, this is after Tony left his distress message and thought all hope was lost, food ran out because Thor ate it all. But after coming to a place of just pretty much just waiting to die, eventually an idea came to him to, I don't know, build another arc reactor, or perhaps even use the means of Groot's room for more oxygen since there's so much plant life in there. But whatever the means may be and whichever solution they come to, I do like that we get to see a bit of that Iron Man 1 and it was a bit of Iron Man 3 as well. But the fact that we return to seeing Tony going back to being a thinker and a builder and really living up to his ideals of like, if you need the suit, then you really don't deserve it. But if you need parts of the suit, I guess you partially deserve it. I don't know. But after this, we see Widow, Steve, Banner, and Rhodey, who are looking up at someone or something that's incoming, to which I believe is more likely to be the arrival of Tony and Nebula, or possibly even the departure of Rocket and Thor. And I put those two guesses above Captain Marvel only with the idea that this footage is actually in the film the way that we see it, because I'd also say that it's more likely that we'd see the arrival of Ant-Man here than the arrival of Captain Marvel at this point. But speaking of the others who are not seen here, when we see Rocket, who's possibly in Norway or maybe still in Wakanda, but we do get a glimpse at his new uniform, which looks a lot like the one from the comics, with the blue and the red, the vest, the buttons, the gloves, which is pretty dope. But as far as what he's doing here when he opens this wooden door, and he's probably scavenging for parts to build something, which is the most likely assumption. But in the comics, and I know it's a stretch that they'd actually do this in the films, but in the comics, Rocket actually knows the creator of the Microverse, which is something that the films have kind of blended the Quantumverse into. And I got a link down in the description going much more into depth about it. But with Rocket having knowledge of Prince Wayfinder, he may be going to seek him out. Just a possibility. And I got a link down in the description where I go much more into depth about that, which is an older theory that I did that has been jumping back to the front of my mind, mainly with all these rumors also about Black Knight that have been popping up everywhere recently. And with his history of teaming up with the Avengers facing Kang, in which where all the Avengers died and he had to bring them back, this really puts the idea in my mind of them possibly merging these two characters together and definitely giving us a version of the Ebony Blade, which is the sword of Black Knight, or perhaps even the sword in the star that we talked about in the previous video, once again linked down below, but possibly merging the origin and the power set of these two swords to be one that they had to retrieve from the quantum realm at some point in time in Avengers Endgame. And it's just a thought, don't want to go too deep into it, at least not yet. But the very next thing we'll see, and we'll get to Thor in a little bit, but the very next thing we see is Widow with the longer hair, keeping her skills sharp, because you don't have to get ready if you stay ready. But seeing her here with the longer hair just appears to be another clue that a significant amount of time has passed since the snap. map. It's likely at the Avengers headquarters, which does have a number of rooms looking out over a body of water, to where she continues to train, whether it be for the next threat, whether it be just to look for Clint Barton. In either way, this is no time to relax or let your skills get rusty. But next up, and just flashing through these clips that go by in like seconds, even less than seconds. But here where we see both Scott Lang and James Rhodes suiting up into their Ant-Man and War Machine helmets. This is likely the moment you get after you get a speech from Steve Rogers, who leads you to believe that the craziest plan that you ever came up with in your whole life is actually gonna work. And I say that because Scott looks super gassed when he put this helmet on, like he is premium unleaded right here, and ready to risk it all for whatever Cap just said. But after this, next up, jumping to Thor, who most likely in this scene is still in Wakanda. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter saying that he was at the same location as Thanos on Titan 2, but when I did a comparison it just didn't match up because Thanos was in more of a hut versus where we see Thor at in this actual spot. And next up we got Clint Barton rocking that Justin Bieber please believe it, to whom I'm pretty sure is going to have a crazy moment as far as what his role is and what crazy shot he needs to make, which will probably include Ant-Man much like Civil War, but I do believe it's going to be something ridiculous when that moment comes. And next up, when we get this shot of Cap's hands, which are shaking before he tightens the strap. Like, one, I think it's amazing that he got his shield back, but also this looks a lot like the shield before Age of Ultron without the magnets. Like, it's full strap all the way through like Captain America the First Avenger, all leather behind the vibranium, no Stark tech, which could be another subtle hint towards the time travel with Cap using the older shield because they really don't show the front here. But also with the idea of Cap using the older shield versus the newer one with the Stark tech, this could also build towards a moment with much more tension, meaning that when he throws that shield there's no guarantee of it coming back, which alone makes the stakes more higher, meaning that every time he throws it he has to make it count. And also with us seeing his hand shake here, we can pretty much guarantee that at this moment he's stepping into that life-threatening I'm sacrificing my life for the world type of moment, unless it was part of the post-credits and this was Bucky Barnes the whole time, like Bucky Barnes becoming Captain America and this is him putting on the shield, and they just added the metal arm later on because this whole thing was put in just to throw us off. But nah, it's not like that's ever happened before. But last but not least, where we get the Avengers walking together through the Avengers facility, through the hangar, which I'm sure is a location within the Avengers facility that we'll see a lot more continuing through phase 4 as they untie the connections between Carol Danvers and Monica Rambeau. But here, leading the way from right to left, we see Steve Rogers followed behind by Thor, then Natasha Romanoff the Black Widow, followed behind by Rocket Raccoon, then Scott Lang, to where behind him we got Rhodey, War Machine, and then next to Rhodey, or kind of behind next to Rhodey, you got Bruce Banner, to where at this point we still don't have Captain Marvel. Not yet. But much like you guys already know, all of this can change, and likely some of it is just to hide specific changes with certain characters, because most likely when we truly get into that third act, they will be wearing their new suits, which will be integrated with both Hank Pym and Tony Stark technology to utilize the means necessary to execute the endgame plan. But that'll do it for this one, guys. I mainly just wanted to share my first thoughts and stir up a few things with a couple of theories. Once again, take all of this with a grain of salt, because with these Marvel trailers, you really just don't know, which is something I like a lot about them, because they serve the purpose correctly of getting you excited with showing you just enough and reminding you of where this film is picking up without spoiling what's to come. But let me know your thoughts down below on Cap's shield, possible time travel confirmation, and what new characters might pop up later on. But leave your thoughts down below and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Alright, later.